Well, there's lots going on with Canadian federal politics, and joining us from Toronto today to give us the nitty-gritty is Brian Lilley, political commentator with the Toronto Sun. Brian, the new list of major projects of national interest is out, and I'm looking. I don't see an oil pipeline anywhere in sight. In fact, you know what? Nothing related to Alberta at all. So, what is the government getting behind, Brian? And do you think Mark Carney is? Yeah, go ahead.
They're getting behind LNG in a big way, but it's
Okay.
unfortunately for you all focused on British Columbia instead of Alberta. So he's going to make an announcement Thursday in Prince Rupert, a site of an LNG export terminal, and it will include a pipeline for this natural gas, but it'll be a pipeline that is solely within the confines of British Columbia. It'll take from the gas fields of northeastern Alberta to Prince Rupert for export. And the reason that I point this out and stress this, Paul, is that Carney's been trying to suck and blow at the same time, you might say, when it comes to oil and gas industry. But an impediment to a pipeline to the northwest coast of Canada is British Columbia Premier David Eby. But Eby will support this pipeline because even though New Democrats and the Greens really don't like natural gas, they don't believe it's cleaner burning than oil, it's lower emissions, all of that. He needs the revenue. The EB government is spending more than they can take in, so they need the revenue from this project. And he doesn't have to deal with any of his, Mud Hut Brigade members of the NDP caucus saying, "Why are we supporting the oil patch and the oil sands in Alberta?" So that's part of why he's getting behind that. The other projects on the list, a critical minerals mine in New Brunswick, tungsten and other minerals will be mined there. That's one that the United States government, I believe, has taken an equity position in. They've bought into it through the Pentagon. You've got a nickel mine in northern Ontario, but it's nowhere near Ontario's big ask, which is the Ring of Fire. That's the truly northern area of the province where there's all these critical minerals. Nothing about that. And then you've got a hydroelectric project in Iqaluit. Look, talking to people in the Smith government, in the Ford government, Premier Smith is looking to sign a memorandum of understanding with Prime Minister Carney on moving forward on oil and gas projects. They're hoping that could come soon. When I spoke to them the other day, they said, "Will it be this week?" It's not feeling like it. The Ford government, they're trying to sign an agreement for one project, one review, because so far on their Ring of Fire project, the whole issue of getting a road up there is the federal government trying to block it with an extra environmental assessment. The Impact Assessment Act, it doesn't just mean no new pipelines, it means no new anything because they get in the way of everything. So there's nothing for Alberta, but maybe that's not a bad thing. My takeaway from this list is it's very unambitious, and there are things happening for Alberta and the other provinces that might actually result in something more than this list of major projects of national interest.
Maybe later sometime, right? I mean, it's all. I mean, these pipelines are kind of boring anyway, as you know. According to our Prime Minister, anyway, comment at a speech in Toronto, right? These kinds of things are boring, right? He also dismissed the idea that government regulations are actually hampering the development of the oil and gas industry. So, with a comment like that, how do you justify that?
He was being playful with the woman that was interviewing them. Apparently, she used to be on BNN, the business network, and she has interviewed him many times. And so there's a bit of a familiarity there. But I found him to be very dismissive of her and of real concern. She was trying to ask valid questions, and he did call pipelines boring. And then he looked around the room, and it's a downtown Toronto business crowd, and he's saying, "Oh, how many people here are working on the pipeline?" And then he points to Navdeep Bains, a former Trudeau-era cabinet minister, who's now an executive at Rogers. "Oh, Nav, are you working on the pipeline?" Of course, Nav's not working on the pipeline. So he was kind of mocking pipelines and saying there's much more to the Canadian economy. Yes, there is, and we want a diversified economy. I mean, Albertans remember when oil and gas was absolutely everything. It's still a major part, but the economy's diversified. Same next door in Saskatchewan. So we want a diversified economy. But oil is still it is our biggest export by far, and it shouldn't be described as boring. It shouldn't be dismissed. And while he says that the regulatory environment isn't hurting, well, the same day that he said that, the CEOs of TC Energy and Enbridge were having calls with analysts, and they're saying the exact opposite.
Yeah, just makes you go tilt, scratch your head, and man, let's get on the same page here somehow. Yeah, you're reporting that the Carney government's soon going to be announcing that it is delaying, but will keep the EV mandate. I mean, here in Lethbridge, you look around anywhere in southern Alberta. I mean, EVs aren't exactly jumping off the car lots, right? And again, you look for, boy, we should have a whole bunch of charging stations coming into place, right? Nowhere even close to meeting that kind of a mandate. So, I mean, I thought this was gone. So what's up with the change here?
Well, we've been looking at the drama inside the Conservative Party, right? With the floor crossing and Matt Genereux and all of that. Well, the Liberals have their own drama. And Mark Carney has to keep the Green Caucus within the Liberals in place. And some of them are really upset with moves like getting rid of the consumer carbon tax. And they did not want him to get rid of the EV mandate. So he's got to keep his Liberal Party caucus together. He's trying to cobble together a majority, right, by poaching from other parties. But won't matter if he poaches from other parties if he starts losing people in his own caucus, if they go sit as independents or drop out of politics. And I mentioned too in my column, Stephen Guilbeault, the Heritage Minister, and Jonathan Wilkinson, the former Natural Resources Minister under Trudeau. These two guys are big deals inside the Liberal Party. They also represent ridings that in the past haven't always been Liberal. They're not safe seats. So those guys go, well, that could flip a seat to the Conservatives in the case of Wilkinson. Conservatives held it before Wilkinson. Reform and Canadian Alliance held it years ago. In the case of Stephen Guilbeault's riding, the Bloc and the NDP have held that. It's a downtown Montreal riding, not normally super friendly Liberal territory. So he's got to be worried, and that's part of what's happening. And you're seeing other cracks within the Liberal caucus. Nathaniel Erskine Smith, very concerned that there's not enough about climate change in the budget, being very openly critical of the budget. All of these are reasons why he's got to make moves like this, even though it's bad for the economy and for Ontario's big industry, the auto industry. So, puzzling move in my view, but very much driven by partisan political considerations.
Lots of tap dancing going on then. Okay. And of course, the Liberals continue to try to nab as many MPs as they can from any party willing to, any MP willing to cross the line there, I guess. So it's a bit of a full court press on the Conservatives. And you're thinking that's maybe they're trying to actually get rid of Pierre Poilievre here. I mean, you think that's actually the case?
That's my working theory at this point, is that this is a destabilization exercise. This is a psychological warfare, campaign going on against Poilievre. Look, they took Chris d'Entremont. They almost took Matt Genereux. And they're putting the word out there that others are crossing. They're floating names of people that would never cross and join the Liberals, people that I know. People that I've spoken to have said, why is my name being floated? I haven't even talked to any Liberals. So to me, this works for Carney. It makes it look like he's got momentum. Poilievre, he's lucky. He's in a break week. MPs are back in the ridings for Remembrance Day ceremonies yesterday. And so, the fever pitch that was going on last week, the feeding frenzy on Parliament Hill, that's kind of taken a break. And folks can get back to reality a little bit. And if Poilievre can contain this, manage it properly, he can go forward and win the leadership review in January. But I think that the Liberals want to make sure he doesn't, because he's still polling well, despite all the claims that nobody likes him, that nobody wants to vote for him. That's simply not true. The polling average at 338canada.com is 43% for the Liberals, 40% for the Conservatives. That would give us a parliament that looks just like today's, a minority. That's not what Mark Carney wants. Carney and his team, there are people on his team that are looking and saying, okay, maybe, if things are going well, maybe we can engineer a spring election and get a majority. If we can't poach one now, we'll get one in the spring. Well, you can't do that if Pierre Poilievre is threatening you. And if the election is about affordability, we know Poilievre polls better on that. So I think, yeah, D'Entremont had his reasons, and I've written plenty about that, of why he crossed the floor. But a lot of this is just psychological warfare.
Yeah, maybe jump in there a bit on the Chris D'Entremont. So you've got a new piece out there talking about that narrative on that whole thing is off balance there. So how do you see it? What's
Well,
behind
you
that?
know, it's right now it's being put forward as, oh, I'm a poor red Tory and I wasn't supported by
Yeah.
my party. D'Entremont used to be an MLA in Nova Scotia. And when Tim Houston won the leadership, Tim's a very moderate, middle of the road, nice guy, conservative. D'Entremont went to Andrew Scheer, who is not a middle of the road conservative, who's a social conservative and a fiscal hawk. And you have all of these things within the party, by the way, and that they all exist provincially and federally within the same party. But, you know, Scheer is very different in how he operates. And he's a SOCON. He's a pro-lifer. Guess what? So's Chris D'Entremont. You don't normally find that with
Really?
red Tories these
Wow.
days. So
No.
that part is off. Then he didn't get support from his party. In 2023, when Anthony Rota had to resign as speaker because of the Nazi guy showing up when Zelensky was in parliament, D'Entremont went to Pierre Poilievre and said, I want to run as speaker. Pierre was like, no, I don't think it's a good idea for one of ours. You lose a vote. And D'Entremont convinced him. And Poilievre put his whole office, the whole OLO was behind him. And he failed miserably because D'Entremont had done nothing to set up a campaign. He had no call sheet. He had no list of who he was supporting him. That's why the Liberals or the Conservatives didn't back him for speaker after this last election. They ran him before, and it was a disaster. They're not going to run him again, but he felt entitled to that. He wanted one more run as an MP, one more term with the speaker's salary, which is a $100,000 increase, and a house and a car and driver and all of that. He wanted that to pad his pension when he retired at the end of this next term. He didn't get it because his party said, sorry, you failed miserably last time.
Well, we'll see what happens in the next election, see how D'Entremont does with that. Of course, well, big question, just briefly here before we let you go. You think we're going to see an election as a result of the budget?
Probably not. I'm not going to be 100% sure on that. I was watching a video recently of a staffer who was there during Joe Clark's term back in '79. I'm not old enough to remember all the details of that, but he described how they were in the same situation as a lot of people now. There's no way anybody wants an election. There won't be an election. And then there was because of mistakes made and miscalculation. So I don't think so, but it's a minority parliament. So you always could see one.
All right. Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
Brian Lilley, a political commentator with the Toronto Sun.